Here with me now, Amna Nawaz, co-anchor of PBS NewsHour and an MSNBC contributor. Amna, Vladimir Putin has acted with near impunity for years, but the death of Navalny is particularly brazen. What does this suggest about Putin's grip on power and how he views himself right now?
I think it's fair to say that in the years leading up to where we are today and the alleged death of Alexei Navalny, which everyone seems to agree, even though it's unconfirmed, has actually happened. Putin's grip has only really tightened on power. He's managed to stay in office, not because he governs by the will of the people, but because he essentially wipes out any and all dissent and opposition. That is how Putin has stayed in power for the better part of a quarter century now. Alexei Navalny was no different, right? So I think when you talk to Russia watchers right now, what they say is this is a Putin that is emboldened. He has fended off a Ukrainian counteroffensive that was meant to be a kind of turning point in the war that it wasn't. He sees a U.S. Congress that is deadlocked on whether or not it can actually move forward to supply more aid to Ukraine. And he sees a likely incoming presidential nominee in the form of Donald Trump, who has in the past expressed admiration for him and, in fact, believed Putin's own word against the word of U.S. intelligence agencies. And so Putin is, to put it bluntly, sort of sitting pretty. There is no verbal, no vocal, no strong opposition to him at this moment. Navalny was really it. He was the last line of defense, and he is now gone.
So there is no organized opposition left within Russia with the death of Navalny?
No, the pressure on much of the opposition had been mounting in the years really leading up to the assassination attempt, the poisoning of Alexei Navalny back in 2020. And my understanding now is that opposition largely operates in exile. There's a lot of work going around and continuing with the kind of YouTube videos that do reach an audience, but they're not on the ground. They're not community-based. They're not a grassroots organization any longer. Think back just to the mobilization that Putin launched after the invasion of Ukraine. Hundreds of thousands of young men fled the country rather than subject themselves to conscription. And there's sort of a sense that there's passivity in Russian circles and society right now, that this is the way it is with Putin in charge, and nothing's going to change soon.
So then am I to take it that, Putin is up for a election in Russia? There's no doubt that he will win it. But has he made a mistake by making Navalny a martyr, transforming him into a martyr by murdering him?
In many ways, there was some confusion and really kind of bewilderment around why he paid so much attention to Navalny. He did face some of the largest opposition crowds he's seen, as Richard mentioned there in 2011 and 2012. We're talking about 180 cities across Russia and tens of thousands of people turning out in the streets. But it was not an overwhelming majority of people in Russia. That is worth pointing out. It was largely educated circles, more urban circles. And yet still, it was almost as if the attention that Putin paid to Navalny made him that much stronger, made Navalny that much more potent of a force against him. There's no force like that right now, though. So, as you say, there's essentially a glide path for Putin into what's essentially a foregone conclusion in the upcoming elections in March.
Mm-hmm. And real quickly, the death of Navalny sent shockwaves through the Munich Security Conference, but so did Donald Trump's language of talking about, if NATO doesn't pay its dues, then Russia he'll let them, quote, do whatever the hell they want. Mm-hmm. How damaging, real quickly, is that kind of language, especially now and especially in light of the murder of Navalny?
It's incredibly damaging. I mean, for months we've been hearing about European allies expressing concern as they saw sort of an inevitable march of former President Trump now becoming the Republican nominee. He's expressed doubt about the NATO alliance in the past as well, and they are to some degree hedging their bets. The news of Navalny's demise now, I think, only adds to that. It shows Putin is not going anywhere. He's a formidable force, and the U.S. and its allies need to reckon with that for the foreseeing future.